Hello there, people of the internet. This is a little video series I'm doing where I go through different time periods and I talk about what my personal loadout would be if I existed in that time period. And I'm trying to base off of not only the things that I own, but what would have been cutting edge technology for that time period. And now we're going to go ahead and look at the 1920s. Yeah, let's go ahead and call it the 1920s. I was thinking about doing like a World War I variation, but a lot of your firearms that were involved in World War I were very similar to this right here. This is a 9130. Russia would be using the 1891 pattern, but this right here is a Mosin Nagant, and this right here was originally developed in 1891. Basically, every country that was still using their 5-shot bolt-action systems, those systems were designed in essentially the 1890s or so. And not a whole lot of firearms technology really progressed in terms of an individual using a specific amount of firepower. Not a whole lot of technology improved during the time period that led up to the First World War. So I thought about including World War I. Wow, it is really hot out here. I thought about including like a World War I loadout, but I'm like, I've already gone through all the 1890s rifles. There's really no point in me looking at a World War I loadout because they were still using the same things that were developed during that time period. So rather than look at an 1890s loadout, just, you know, the same exact thing that I looked at before, just different variations that were used in World War I figured that I'd bump myself up to the 1920s. So I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb here and say, for my primary arm, for me as an individual, I would likely rock the Thompson submachine gun. Now this is a volunteer enterprise, and it's a look-alike for an M1A1 model. The Tommy guns of the time period would look different than this, but this is all I have, so this is just is what is going to have to serve for representation purposes. But 45 ACP, I would probably run mine in semi-auto only. Back during this time period, you could get full auto firearms without, well, this was back before the NFA existed, but I would probably run mine in semi-auto only just for ammo conservation purposes, and because, I mean, unless I really get myself into something, I don't foresee me needing to have a full auto capable firearm to be able to protect myself. I'm not talking about in times of warfare. I'm talking about for me as an individual, like what I would pick for my primary setup during that time period in order to stay above the curve of everybody else. Now, a lot of people say there was tons of firearms development. Look at all the machine guns and whatnot that were used in World War I. Whenever I am looking at these firearms, I'm looking at my own personal use for the firearms. And I mean, this isn't a military context by any stretch of the imagination. This right here is me picking what I would use, just like how a lot of Americans pick the AR platform nowadays. I would pick the Thompson if we were back in the 1920s. Now, there were a lot of really good weapons platforms out there on the market, but like I said, most of them for individual use were, what am I trying to say? They were designed in the 1890s or early 1900s, around that time period. And I already had a look at all of those platforms. So now we're going to go ahead and send a couple of rounds of this 45 ACP downrange, because I happen to have a couple of rounds for this. Hooray! I haven't shot this thing in a minute. So this is what I would use if I had the option to back then. I actually shot those things out. Fantastic. I would definitely just use a semi-auto version, because I would not need a full auto capable firearm for that time period, just because of my own capabilities as a shooter. I thought about going with, I mean, there's tons of different full power rifles out there and tons of different all sorts of things out there, and well, if I'm going to spitball here, the Thompson was actually made before the 1920s, so I would be able to have this firearms platform at the very start of that decade. I wouldn't have to wait it out for later things to develop throughout the 1920s. And most of the things that developed in the 1920s were based off of previous systems that had already existed. Because of World War I, well, that's kind of the era that gave way to machine guns, or not machine guns, submachine guns existing, things that were in pistol calibers, and in my own personal opinion, with my own personal needs, with what existed at that time period, rather than have a bolt action repeating rifle, having a pistol caliber carbine at that point, since I would use it in semi-auto or a submachine gun, I guess, if I felt like using full auto. I feel like that right there would be the ideal situation for myself. Now, of course, during this time period, the 1911 also existed, also chambered in 45 ACP. That would be ideal for that particular setup, because I could use the same ammunition between my handgun and my primary firearm, my primary rifle, my primary SMG, my primary carbine. What is it that you would call that during that time period? I know I'd have a 1911 and a Thompson, and that's likely what I would carry for a very, very long time, because that is a very capable setup. So let's send some more 45 ACP downrange. There's one round. There's 2 rounds. Fantastic. Yeah, I like this platform. I like the setup. I like those options. For what came out in the 1920s, I'd say that would probably be what I would call cutting-edge revolutionary technology, based off of the things that I have inside of my collection. Now, as we progress further more towards World War II, we'll start to see a lot more development that happens. So if you would like to be around for that, then hopefully you guys decide to be around for that. I'm not sure when I'll put that out. I don't really have a specific time period where I'm launching these videos. I'm just kind of doing it as I go along. So I think that this right here is all I have to say about it. Kind of a short-ish video. Not a whole lot more to say about it. Of course, the Thompson during that time period would be using the Bushlock system, and I would likely be using a drum magazine as opposed to a stick magazine. So yeah, a couple of differences from that in comparison to what I am showing here. Besides that, thanks for watching, folks. I do appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below has a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. There's our outro. It is hot as freaking, my God, it is hot out here. Very hot. I am just drenched and dripping with sweat. I'm going to go ahead and go cool down with some whiskey on the rocks. You guys go off. Have yourself a fantastic day. I'll see you guys on the next episode. And next episode, I reckon we're probably going to do the 1930s, because there was a lot of development that happened in the 1930s. I'll see y'all later. Since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garrett. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.